Hello and welcome, Exiles. Today I want to take a look at two very cool keystones that I'm a big fan of. Eternal Youth, one I've used many times, and a new keystone, Blood-Soaked Blade, a keystone I have not used before and got added this league. Now, Blood-Soaked Blade, the new keystone, applies to tinctures. It essentially makes the mana burn effect from tinctures apply to your life instead of your mana, and it swaps out the naming convention and calls it Weeping Wounds because it's technically, different, but it does the same thing. Any stat that says per mana burn, you get this, also applies to Weeping Wounds, and it's just 1% life per second per stack versus 1% mana per second per stack. Same thing going on there. Now, let's talk into what is the benefits and why do I like these two keystones together. Well, Bloodsoaked Blade means, you're going to have a lot of life degen. Whereas Eternal Youth says, hey, recharge applies to your life. Now, if you know anything about recharge has a base rate of 33% per second, which can be increased with recharge rate, which is suffixes you could find on gear. If you run a discipline aura, that will also apply. And these things are like large amounts. Like, for example, recharge rate suffix on your gloves, for example, could roll up to 38%, which ends up increasing that 33 number of life per second to like 45, 46% per second, which is a large amount of sustain. The idea being, if you play something like an ES-based character, like let's say Ivory Tower, or maybe you transfer over the Grasping Mail Chayula's mod that makes it so damage can't bypass your ES while not on low life, you could run those sorts of things as an ES build sort of setup, and you could have this permanent sustain, which helps you have very good uptime on some powerful tinctures, mainly the Sap of Seasons. Sap of Seasons gives you higher penetration based on the amount of mana burn, up to 200%, which that is just a wild number. If you get your mana burn all the way up to 200%, that's just a ridiculous amount of penetration. But even getting up to 50, 70, 80, 90, even numbers like that is a huge damage multiplier to any elemental attack-based character. And so the idea is, with a couple suffixes and maybe you run discipline, you can get this thing all the way up to 100 plus mana burn. For myself, I had two suffixes on two pieces of gear. That's all I had for recharge rate. And mana burn could ramp all the way up to 80. Now, I didn't run an ES character. I actually ran dissolution. Now, if you're looking at this in game now, you'll see we have a 21,000 life character. We are using the dissolution gem. And the idea was I'm separating the damage from my life pool for permanent recharge. And you'll see my recharge rate here says life recharge per second, 11,440 whatever. So let's start by going to a zone where I can turn on these tinctures and show you how it ramps up as the tinctures go on. This idea was basically just like, tinctures have some really powerful stats, and I just wanted to see if I could have them up for a longer period of time. So I turned on the Sap of Season. It will start ramping. And I have a Scion, which allows me to do a second tincture with the Warden Ascendancy. Side note, the Warden Ascendancy, if you steal that, is like a combination of 50C and 100C. That's how much I got the Forbidden Flesh and Flame for, so pretty cheap. But the mana burn will stack up about twice as fast, and we'll just show you how fast this goes down or how fast it goes up. Up till about 60, 55 to 60, we are basically net sustaining. And then when we start getting above that, we will start to degen. And I think we get all the way up to, I want to say 70 or 80 mana burn with our current setup. You'll see we're going down rapidly. We get to 78, we tap out, and then the cooldown starts. So we had a really long uptime where we had those on, we were able to map throughout, and it got to 78. Our average pen from this flask was, 35-ish. That's a ton of extra damage. 35-ish pen plus 100% damage. That's pretty dang cool. And of course, you get to reactivate them once they turn off, and you can repeat the cycle. The idea was I would have, the combination I thought of is I'll go Dissolution, separate the damage from the life pool. I'll go into Eternal Youth. I'll have this recharge. I will go into Sap of Seasons. And then I was going to go into things like Blood Magic, so I would solve my mana sustain and all of that at the same time. And then I'd pair it with a Wrathbith and a Crown of Eyes. The idea being Wrathbith gives you 5% per 100 life. With 20,000 life, that's about 1,000% damage. You put on Crown of Eyes, and that's 1,500% total increased damage, which means I don't have to have increased damage on my tree anywhere, and I can put my more passives into more life or other stats I want on the tree. For example, I went into attack and spell block because Avoidance Layers paired with Dissolution is a good thing. Now, I had some fun with this character. I chose Spectre Throw. Spectre Throw is not optimal. It's just something I wanted to play. I wanted to throw some bananas around, so I did it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this skill. I wouldn't even necessarily recommend this setup overall, because there are some caveats, some things I learned. And the biggest thing I learned was you do sometimes have your recharge interrupted on dissolution. Now, previously, I thought this was always just some bugged interaction where your recharge would stop for certain things that didn't make sense. And I think this is still the case where I'm trying to remember the builds I was playing. It was Ivory Tower builds where recharge would get interrupted, and it seemed like it was something to do with like predictive mode or something to do with the internet settings. Because basically, I had multiple people who ran into a certain issue where the Ivory Tower setup build would have their Eternal Youth recharge stop randomly when it didn't make sense, and it was something to do with that. And I think that's still the case. But differently than that, if you have damage that you take and it reserves your life, and the life total reserved ends up having to remove life to reserve that, that will count as taking damage and it will interrupt the recharge. What that means is if I'm at 29.76 out of 29.76 and I take 100 damage, it reserves life, that will interrupt me for 2 seconds. So say I was ramping up my tincture stacks and I was at like, let's say 20, and I took some damage, then I would start to degen 20% per second. But that would take me 5 seconds to get to 0. Before that 5 seconds is over, we'd get to like 2 seconds, we'd get down to here. The recharge would start again and it would go back up and I'd fill and I'd keep ramping the stacks and it would be fine. But if I was at like 40 stacks or 45 stacks, just enough where if I took a more decent hit, like, say I lost like 4K life or something, and then I started degenning for 45 or 45% per second, it would actually, before my recharge started, it would go all the way down and I'd have my ramp of penetration canceled. The recharge won't stop if you have, let's say you already have something where you're degenning and your life is below your top number, and then you have some reserved. That won't interrupt your recharge. That counts as not taking damage of the recharge. It's only when the life reserves a number that makes the life get removed that it counts as taking damage. This is based on a post from Mark, the mechanics legend himself, the man, the myth, the legend, who, if there's ever an answer where you're seeking to understand the game a bit better on a deeper mechanical level, he's the guy to talk to. And he answered a forum post specifically about this thing with the recharge, which is new to me. I didn't realize that's what was happening with dissolution because it seemed kind of inconsistent. Sometimes it felt like the recharge would stop, sometimes it didn't, and it didn't quite make sense to me. Some of those instances I think was maybe something buggy to do with internet or something else entirely, but other instances was based on that right there. If the life is reserved and it removes life to reserve that life, that counts as taking damage to your life pool. Whereas previously I thought you just couldn't take damage to your life pool at all with dissolution, and I was just wrong about that. So it was something new to me. But anyways, I say all that to say this. If I was going to do this, I liked this setup. It felt pretty good. But if I was going to do this again, I would do this as an ES-based character where enemies cannot reserve my life to then make me stop my recharge. I'd rather my tinctures be able to ramp to full effect, so that way I get the best possible amount of penetrations out of something like Sap of Seasons. It still ended up where I had very high uptime on tinctures that are giving me, 40 attack speed, 200 crit, 126% damage, and, 40 pen or whatever it is. So these were still quite beneficial to my character. But if I had it to do again, I would probably do it a bit differently. I would think about doing it like I did, let's say, if you were familiar with Gagarf, the character I made that was an Ivory Tower Scion, I'd be tempted to make it like that, like a Strength Stacker, where I go Wrathbith, I go Ivory Tower. I do similar things with the life and strength stacking, but instead of doing, let's say, Glimpse of Chaos or Crown of the Inward Eye, I would do something like Crown of Eyes like this, and I think that would pair quite nicely. I think you could probably get this character to 50,000 ES, a decent strength number, and you could really make a monster of a character, probably stronger than I made that RF build. RF is, I always like to say this, it's my favorite skill, but it's not that strong. There are just stronger things. Hit-based skills just deal more damage, and a strength stacker in the Gagarf package would probably just be better, and these tinctures are a massive buff to that sort of angle of building a character. So that is my conclusions on that. But as for the character diving in a bit deeper, for those curious, I did Dissolution. I went into doing a bit of block for avoidance layers for dissolution paired with ailment immunities. If you ever play dissolution, you need bleed, poison, ignite immunity, and that is mandatory in my opinion, because the way dissolution works is it has a 2-second timer where if you don't take damage, you get your life unreserved and you can keep fighting. And so if you get hit with an ignite, which lasts, I don't know, 5 seconds, 4 seconds, whatever it is, during that duration, you count as taking damage. And then after the ignite ends, then you have 2 more seconds. So every time you would get ignited, you'd have a 6-second window where you would just be ticking down and getting hit more, and eventually you'd die. But if you get poison immunity, ignite immunity, bleed immunity, you don't have to deal with those sorts of things. So the way you deal with that is you get a pair of boots like this, where you do cannot be poisoned, plus an abyssal socket. This is very easy to force. If you do a hollow fossil, and then I believe, I don't know if it's like eroded plus Aberrat or something. I forget what the three, basically you need a glyphic fossil, which guarantees an essence modifier or a corrupted essence modifier, which one of them is cannot be poisoned. You can actually cancel out all the other 3 modifiers, so you can guarantee an abyssal socket and cannot be poisoned on the same like resonator or whatever. So anyways, if you have cannot be poisoned, you can get bleed avoid on your boot implicit, and then you can get bleed avoid on your abyssal jewel. And then if you're a little bit off, like I didn't necessarily want to upgrade my bleed avoid all the way to perfect because that costs a lot with conflict orbs, you can just do a couple bleed avoid tattoos that cap off. So we have bleed avoid, we have cannot be poisoned, and of course as a scion we have unaffected by ignite from the chieftain node over here. We are a bit of a strike stacker, basically just to get life and to get some base damage. I wanted to do that, so I made a fancy little synthesized siege axe. You could also just use something like a Brutus lead sprinkler. I went for spectral throw. I don't think spectral throw was the best. I think with the new slam skills, they're just probably stronger effectiveness in my opinion. Like, for example, if you did volcanic fissure of snaking, a Brutus lead sprinkler, you'd probably just be better off damage than my current character. I just wanted to play throwing bananas, so I did it. And then we have a bunch of life masteries, just making the life number go up. Making the life number go up starts to be less and less efficient in terms of it's okay damage from Wrathbith, but it's not necessarily like there's probably more efficient damage nodes I could do. For example, if I got something like lethality cluster here, crit multi, stuff like that, that would help my character's DPS quite a bit more than necessarily reaching out and forcing in all these extra life nodes. But I just like making the number go up, even if it's not necessarily objectively the correct way to min-max the DPS, if that makes sense. Also, if you make the life number go up, you can effectively make your character a bit tanky. We did Ubers. I did do 7 out of 7 on this character, but I mean, our investment's fairly decent. If we didn't do 7 out of 7, that'd be a little bit embarrassing. We died, I think, 3 times throughout all 7 Ubers to a couple of misplays here and there. But anyways, that is the character, and I'll give you guys a little bit of a showcase of what this looks like doing. I guess we can do T17 if I have some available. We have Citadel and we have Abomination. Oh, great. These are 2 maps that would be not necessarily the greatest for a character like this, and we'll just see how it goes. What have I got myself into? I wonder if I should... Oh, one thing I should also say about using Spectral Throw is you kind of have to swap between like GMP versus like another gem for single target. I did like Far Shot with this axe, which makes slower proj not really work out, and it gets a little bit weird, but that's just what I tried to do because I wanted to try something out weird. Ultimately, just doing, you know, something like a slam skill, Brutus lead sprinkler, or just a more standardized skill. You could use this axe with, you know, volcanic fissure, stuff like that. I'm pretty sure would just be better DPS than what we're doing here. But this sounded like fun to me, so that's what we did. Okay, we have Burning Ground, Grasping Vines, Unstable Tentacle Fields. This is probably fine. 2 proj is going to be really hard to dodge. Do I have Burn Ground immunity? I don't have that yet, so we're going to roll over that just because it breaks Dissolution a bit. To stand on that sort of stuff. Suppression, res, crit, that should be fine. Meteor when I use a flask might get me killed. I don't really know. And we'll just try to run this as a little bit of a showcase, doing a T17 Abomination, and hopefully I don't embarrass myself too much here with this showcase of what the character looks like playing. Hopefully you saw some gameplay before when I was talking about the Keystones a little bit, give you an idea of what the character looks like in that regard. But ultimately, I had some fun playing this character. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the way I did it. I have some changes in my mind of things I think I would do. I would probably believe an ivory tower approach would be far superior. But, you know, it's hard to go back, and I don't want to, you know, rechange everything. I just want to say, hey, this is the character I played, had fun doing it, and there's other builds I want to make and have plans to do. So you'll see on my life pool, okay, first of all, you'll notice my green bar will be all over the map. It'll go down, it'll go up. You don't look at that when you're playing Dissolution. That's not your death condition. You'll see this goes all the way down. That's not what I'm gonna die to. That doesn't mean I'm in danger. What means I'm in danger is if my life is getting reserved. That's what means I'm in danger. I just realized I've been playing without my reservations on, so silly. I was missing my haste and Tempest Shield. But yeah, if my life get reserved all the way down, that's when I'm actually gonna die. Now, one thing I should note, another little advantage with Dissolution, is technically you can have a bunch of reservations on, and those won't actually cause you to be more danger. Like, for example, see, we got reserved all the way down here, and I had Tempest Shield on. What would happen is, if they did enough damage where it would maybe kill me, the Tempest Shield would actually get unreserved, and I would have this extra life pool still to go where the enemy would still have to hit me. I don't know if I'm making sense too much here. But Dissolution, basically, you could put a bunch of reservations on, and you just basically have to keep reserving and unreserving them based on if you take damage to your life pool and they get automatically unreserved. I'm not sure if I'm making a ton of sense here, but hopefully I am a little bit. This guy is going to annoy me. We'll just try to kill him before we start this fight, because I don't really want to deal with Betrayal right now while fighting the trio. Alright. That was 4 of them, okay. You out of here. You out of here. What did I do to my thing? Oh, I messed stuff up. I messed stuff up pretty badly, I think. I can't talk to Vagan because he's like stuck inside the wall. Okay, anyways, we'll go ahead and fight the trio here. We'll see how we do. Hopefully we do okay. Not completely endangered. So you saw there, I got all the way reserved low, but my Tempest Shield didn't come on reserve. Hopefully it'll happen actually where I take enough damage where I get Tempest Shield on reserve. So I can showcase it happening. We could also just take enough damage where they'll just do more damage than our Tempest Shield is reserving and just die outright, but hopefully that doesn't. I want to kill Chaperone before I kill Doadri if I could. Looks like I'm gonna kill Doadri on accident first. Kind of hard to target this. Oh, I got Doadri. Or I got Chaperone first. Something about killing Doadri, Blast protects you from the really bad curses you would get from the curse tomes Doadri puts out, so it's nice if you can avoid that. Keep waiting for them to unreserve my Tempest Shield. I didn't do enough damage. Alright, whatever. I'm just gonna kill him. Basically, if they did do enough damage, they would unreserve the Tempest Shield, and then I would have, I would have to re-reserve it or whatever, but it gives you a little bit of, like, a breath to not die, if that makes sense. Gives you, like, a window. I'm not sure if I'm making sense at all. Anyways. 10 stacks of whatever this is. 7% slower for each stack. Interesting. All debuffs are just like ridiculous. And part of why I have a Trickster addiction is just because of the amount of random debuffs which do things like that. 7% slow per stack up to 10 stacks just sounds so annoying. Have a 70% slow. Your character's moving literally at a third of its normal speed. Doesn't sound too fun to me. Anyways. That was an abomination. Wasn't too pretty. Wasn't the cleanest. I don't think my character's really that well set up in terms of like Spectral Throw is definitely not the correct choice, and I'm lacking a little bit in terms of having my tinctures get turned off. I was kind of forgetting about them in the middle of the fight there, and I was trying to explain some stuff. But anyways, that is the character with Dissolution and Block. Abomination's probably one of the worst fights for a Dissolution character just because there's so many things you would have to dodge or evade. Basically, fewer, smaller, or a bunch of tiny hits on dissolution is kind of scary. Like, I wouldn't want to do a dissolution character in Simulacrum, for example, because you just constantly get chipped down until you just die. The dissolution characters, they thrive in lower hit environments. They're not going to do sustained damage. And that's just what it is. They have some advantages in terms of like being able to scale cool with Wrathpith damage, being able to take big one hits, you know, in terms of like Shaper Slam, stuff like that. But shotgunning, multiple hits in a row, large, dense environments, those are where dissolution builds start to be a little bit more sketch. Now, if you have good block and decent mitigation layers on top of that, they'll feel okay on those sorts of things, and you can even run that sort of content, but that's just like the limitations. Anyways, this was my character I built around Blood-Soaked Blade and Eternal Youth. I just wanted to try them together. Overall, the thing I learned is I think this could be really strong with an Ivory Tower setup, and maybe I'll pursue that in a future league. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good one.